Annalise felt she had become part of the furnishings. At 26, unmarried and possessing a dowry that was more of a polite fiction than a financial instrument, she had mastered the art of blending in. She could sit in a drawing room for 2 hours and leave no more impression than a porcelain vase on the mantelpiece. Today was no different. Her mother's afternoon tea was a battlefield of hushed whispers and competitive pleasantries, and Annalise was a neutral territory no one wished to claim. She watched the other young ladies, girls of 18 and 19, their futures still glittering with possibility. Their laughter was like the chime of tiny bells, bright and clear. Her own laughter, on the rare occasions it surfaced, felt like the creak of a disused hinge. She held her cup, the porcelain cool against her fingers, and focused on the swirl of tea leaves at the bottom. They formed a meaningless pattern, much like the days of her life. Her family was not cruel, merely desperate. Her father, a man of gentle heart and poor financial sense, had left them with a respectable name and little else. Annalise, the eldest, was the family's quiet failure, a constant, visible reminder of their dwindling prospects. Her younger sister, Clara, was their last hope, and the pressure on the girl was a palpable thing, a weight that stole the joy from her youth. Annalise often retreated to her small bedroom, a sanctuary of silence. In her hands, a small block of linden wood and a sharp whittling knife felt more real than the forced smiles and delicate china of the world downstairs. Her father had taught her the craft, his large, calloused hands guiding hers. Now, her only legacy from him was a collection of small, perfect wooden birds, each one captured in a moment of arrested flight. She was carving her own gilded cage, one feather at a time. Resignation had settled over her like a fine layer of dust. She expected to live out her days as a companion to her mother, or perhaps, if they became truly destitute, as a governess to the children of some kinder, wealthier family. It was a bleak tapestry, but one she had grown accustomed to. Hope was a luxury she had long since learned to do without. The arrival of the Duke of Blackwood shattered the afternoon's dreary peace. His carriage, a severe, glossy black, drawn by 2 perfectly matched horses, was an alien object on their quiet street. The sound of the knocker on their front door echoed through the house like a summons. A tremor of panic went through the drawing room. The Duke of Blackwood did not make social calls. He was a creature of myth and parliament, a man spoken of in terms of power and land, never of pleasantries. When he was announced, a hush fell. Alistair, the Duke of Blackwood, was a man carved from granite and shadow. He was not handsome in the conventional rosy-cheeked way of the young dandies who courted the debutantes. His face was all sharp angles and stern lines, his hair dark, and his eyes, a deep, unsettling brown, seemed to miss nothing. He moved with an economy of motion that was both commanding and unnervingly still. A faint, almost imperceptible scent clung to him, not of cologne, but of old paper, leather, and beeswax. As if he had just stepped out of a vast, ancient library, he gave a curt, correct bow to her mother, his gaze sweeping the room and dismissing everyone in it until it landed on Annalise. For the first time in years, she felt seen, not appraised or pitied, but simply seen. The sensation was so foreign, it was almost painful. After the briefest of civilities, he came to the point with a directness that bordered on brutality. "I am here," he said, his voice a low baritone that seemed to absorb the room's ambient sound, to make a proposal to your daughter. Her mother's teacup rattled in its saucer. Clara's eyes were wide with shock. Annalise felt a cold dread mix with a bizarre, hysterical urge to laugh. But the Duke was not looking at her mother. He was looking at her. To Lady Annalise, he clarified, as if there could be any doubt. He requested a private audience. The breach of protocol was staggering, but no one, least of all her flustered mother, was about to deny the Duke of Blackwood. They were left alone in the fading afternoon light, the air thick with unspoken questions. Lady Annalise, he began, foregoing any preamble. I require a wife. You, I believe, require a solution. I am proposing we provide one for each other. The words fell like stones into the quiet pool of her resignation. It was not a declaration of affection, it was a business transaction. She found her voice, a thread of sound in the heavy silence. Your Grace, you have the advantage of me. A flicker of something, surprise? Respect? Crossed his features. I do. Let me surrender it. I have observed you on the few occasions I have been forced into society. You are intelligent, you are observant, and you are quiet. I have no desire for a life of grand passions and dramatic displays. A quiet life suits me. I believe a quiet wife would suit it. The insult was so profound, so exquisitely delivered, that it almost transcended offence and became a work of art. He was offering for her precisely because she was unnoticeable. He wanted a duchess who would be as unobtrusive as a well-behaved ghost. He continued, laying out his terms as if negotiating a treaty. Your family will be provided for. Your sister will have a dowry that will attract the highest bidder should she wish it. You will have the run of my homes, a generous allowance, and my complete and utter indifference, so long as you are discreet and do not embarrass the title. In return, I will have a duchess, an end to my grandmother's matchmaking, and the peace I value above all else. She should have been horrified. She should have been outraged. But as he spoke, a strange, cold clarity settled over her. He was offering her a cage, yes, but it was a far larger and more luxurious cage than the one she was in. He was offering her security. He was offering her sister a future. And in his promise of indifference, she heard the most beautiful word of all: freedom. Freedom from expectation, freedom from the need to please. She looked at this cold, formidable man, and for the first time she saw a path out of the grey landscape of her life. The path was not sunny, but it was clear. I accept your proposal, Your Grace, Annalise said, her own voice sounding distant to her ears. And just like that, the quiet, invisible girl was betrothed to the most powerful duke in the kingdom. The wedding was a swift, private affair. Her family wept with relief. The ton whispered with shock and speculation. Annalise felt like a pawn in a game whose rules she was only just beginning to understand. Life at Blackwood Manor was like living in a museum. The house was immense, a sprawling stone edifice filled with priceless art and profound silence. The servants moved like spectres, efficient and invisible. Her husband, the Duke, was the chief curator of this silent world. They were two polite strangers sharing a post-chaise. They dined together each evening in a cavernous hall, the distance between them at the long mahogany table a physical representation of their marriage. Their conversation was a stilted exchange of pleasantries. Was your day agreeable, Your Grace? Entirely, Your Grace. And yours? Annalise found herself with an astonishing amount of time and no one to account to for it. At first, the freedom was disorienting. She would wander the long, echoing corridors, her hand trailing along the cool, polished wood of the banisters, feeling like an imposter. The Duchess of Blackwood, the title felt like a costume she was wearing, one that was several sizes too large. But slowly, tentatively, she began to inhabit her new life. She discovered the library. It was not a room, It was a cathedral dedicated to the written word, 2 stories high, with a rolling ladder and that same scent of old paper and beeswax that clung to her husband. She spent hours there, losing herself in history, poetry, and science. She was not just reading books, she was inhaling a world of knowledge that had been denied to her. One afternoon, as she was exploring a wing of the manor that seemed long disused, she found a conservatory. Dust motes danced in the shafts of afternoon light that pierced the grimy glass panes. It was filled with dead and dying plants, a forgotten Eden. In a corner, beneath a rotting potting bench, she saw a small, sturdy table. An idea, fragile and daring, took root in her mind. That evening, at dinner, she cleared her throat. The sound was unnaturally loud in the silence. Alistair looked up from his plate, his expression one of mild inquiry. "Your Grace?" "My husband," she began, testing the word. "I have a request." She explained her desire for a small workspace, a place to pursue a hobby. She did not name it. She fully expected him to refuse, to remind her that duchesses did not have hobbies that involved knives and wood shavings. He listened without interruption, his face unreadable. When she finished, a long silence stretched between them, thin as spun sugar. "Very well," he said at last. "See the housekeeper. She will arrange what you need." It was not an enthusiastic endorsement, but it was not a refusal. A week later, she returned to the conservatory to find it transformed. The glass was clean, the dead plants cleared away. Her corner was now a proper workshop. The sturdy table had been sanded and oiled. Upon it lay a new set of whittling knives, their steel gleaming, and a neat stack of linden, oak, and cherry wood blocks. He had not just acquiesced, he had provided. He had seen her unspoken need and met it with silent, startling generosity. He never mentioned it. They never spoke of it, but a tiny, almost imperceptible shift occurred in the architecture of their marriage. A single stone had been moved, and the entire structure felt different. She began to spend her afternoons in the conservatory, the scent of wood shavings mingling with the earthy smell of damp soil. The feel of the wood in her hands was a connection to her old self, but the freedom to create without hiding was a gift of her new life. The little wooden birds she carved were no longer just symbols of her own confinement. Now she carved them with wings outstretched, poised for flight. He too began to reveal small cracks in his granite facade. He would leave a book on the table in the library, open to a page he thought might interest her. Once she came down with a slight cold and found a pot of honey and a lemon left discreetly outside her door. These were not the actions of an indifferent man. They were the gestures of a man who spoke a language of quiet deeds, not of effusive words. The inevitable summons came in a cream-coloured envelope, sealed with the ostentatious crest of the Finch family. They were invited to the ball of the season. Annalise watched Alistair as he read the invitation, saw the faint tightening of his jaw. "We must attend," he said, his voice flat. "It is expected." She knew of Lady Honoria Finch. Everyone did. She was the reigning belle of the Tun, a diamond of the first water, beautiful, witty, and notoriously sharp-tongued. It was widely whispered that she had set her cap for the Duke of Blackwood, and his sudden marriage to a virtual unknown had been a source of great displeasure for her. Annalise felt a knot of anxiety tighten in her stomach. She had been safe in her quiet world, insulated from the vicious social currents she had so gladly left behind. Now, her husband was leading her directly into the heart of the storm. As the date of the ball approached, a tension settled over the manor. Alistair grew more silent, more withdrawn than ever. He spent longer hours in his study, and the faint scent of beeswax that followed him seemed heavier, as if he were sealing himself away. The night before the ball, a storm broke outside, lashing rain against the tall library windows. Unable to sleep, Annalise had gone in search of a book. She found Alistair there, standing before the unlit fireplace, a glass of brandy in his hand, staring into the cold hearth. He looked up as she entered, his expression unguarded for a fleeting moment. She saw not coldness, but a deep, weary sadness. "You cannot sleep either," he stated. It was not a question. "The storm is loud," she offered, a half-truth. He gave a short, bitter laugh that held no humour. "There are worse storms than the ones outside, Your Grace." He gestured with his glass to the chair opposite him. "Sit. You deserve an explanation, I suppose." She sat, her hands folded in her lap, and waited. The only sounds were the drumming of the rain and the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. "You know of Lady Honoria," he began. "You know she expected to be sitting where you are now." Annalise said nothing. "What you do not know is why I would go to such lengths to avoid a wife like her." He took a swallow of brandy, the firelight catching the amber liquid. "When I was a much younger man, I was less guarded. I was in love. Her name was Eleanor. She was much like you in a way, quiet, intelligent, with a gentle heart. But she was not titled. Her father was a country doctor. His voice grew distant, lost in the memory. We were to be married, but society, the world you and I are about to enter tomorrow night, did not approve." The whispers started, led by a circle of cruel, ambitious women. They called her a fortune hunter. They mocked her family. They twisted her innocence into cunning ambition. They dissected her, piece by piece, in their drawing rooms and at their balls. He fell silent, his knuckles white around the glass. "I was arrogant. I thought my title could protect her. I was wrong. The gossip, it broke her spirit. She was not built for that kind of casual cruelty. 6 months after we met, she broke our engagement and returned to the country. A year later, she was dead. A fever, they said. But I know she died of a broken heart, a death dealt by 1,000 paper cuts of gossip." The confession hung in the air between them, a raw, exposed nerve. Annalise finally understood. His coldness was not indifference, it was a fortress built around a wound that had never healed. His desire for a quiet wife was not an insult. It was a desperate attempt to protect that wife from the world that had destroyed the woman he once loved. "I chose you, Annalise," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "because I saw in you a strength Eleanor did not have. But I also chose you because you were invisible. I thought you would not attract their notice, that I could keep you safe in my silence. Now I am leading you to the wolves myself. It was a selfish bargain, and I am sorry for it." She looked at this powerful, broken man and felt a surge of something fierce and protective. He had offered her a business transaction, but he had given her his vulnerability. He had thought he was buying a duchess, but he had inadvertently acquired an ally. "You are not leading me, Alistair," she said, using his name for the first time. Her voice was steady. "We are going together." The night of the Finch ball was a glittering, suffocating affair. The air was thick with perfume and the sound of 1,000 competing conversations. Annalise, in a gown of deep midnight blue that Alistair had commissioned for her, felt the weight of hundreds of eyes. They were a curiosity, the reclusive Duke and his mysterious, mousy Duchess. Lady Honoria Finch was a vision in white and diamonds, her smile as sharp and brilliant as the jewels at her throat. She greeted them with a theatrical display of warmth that did not reach her cold, calculating eyes. "Your Grace, how wonderful that you could tear yourself away from your books," she said to Alistair, before turning her attention to Annalise. "And the new Duchess. We are all so utterly charmed to finally meet you. You have been hiding your light under a bushel." The words were complimentary, but the tone was pure condescension. Throughout the evening, Annalise felt the subtle jabs and veiled insults. Such a plain gown, but so sensible. "Is it true your father was a scholar?" Each comment was a tiny pinprick, designed to make her feel small and out of place. But armed with the knowledge of Alistair's past, she felt not wounded, but resolute. She was not just enduring this for herself. She was enduring it for him. The moment came, as she knew it would, during a lull in the dancing. Lady Honoria had gathered a circle of the most influential members of the ton around them, her court of cronies. She laid her trap with practised ease. "My dear Duchess," Honoria began, her voice dripping with faux sympathy, loud enough for everyone in their circle to hear. "It must be so overwhelming for you. This world is so different from the one you knew. One hears such stories of your family's misfortunes. It is a testament to your character that you have borne it all with such fortitude." It was a masterful attack, painting Annalise as a charity case and the Duke as a man who had married out of pity, or worse, been duped. The air grew thick with anticipation. The crowd leaned in, hungry for the drama. Annalise felt Alistair stiffen beside her, a low growl rumbling in his chest. He was about to unleash the full, terrifying power of his title to defend her, to destroy Honoria. And in doing so, he would prove Honoria's point, that his wife was a helpless creature who needed his protection. Before he could speak, Annalise placed a hand on his arm. The gesture was small, but it was a command. He stopped, looking down at her in surprise. She gave him a look, a silent promise. "Let me." She turned her gaze from her husband to her antagonist. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. A preternatural silence had fallen over their small corner of the ballroom. "You are quite right, Lady Honoria," Annalise said, her voice as clear and cool as a winter morning. The simple agreement took the wind from Honoria's sails. Annalise continued, her eyes locked on the other woman's. "My father was indeed a terrible businessman. A catastrophic one, in fact. He made the fatal error of valuing his honour above profit." A murmur went through the small crowd. This was not the stammering denial or tearful retreat they had expected. "You speak of my family's misfortunes," Annalise went on, her voice calm and measured, each word chosen with the precision of a surgeon. "Let me tell you of the greatest of them. Some years ago, there was a blight that ruined the barley harvest. The tenants on an estate bordering ours were facing starvation and eviction. My father, against all financial sense, used the last of his capital to buy their worthless crop at full price and forgive their debts to him so they might survive the winter." She paused, letting the story settle. She could feel Alistair's stillness beside her, a focused, burning attention. "It was this act of foolish, compassionate honour that ruined us," she said. "He lost his fortune preserving the lives of men and women who were not his responsibility. A terrible businessman, as I said." She let the silence hang for a beat, then delivered the final, devastating blow. Her voice remained level, almost conversational. That neighbouring estate, whose tenants he saved from ruin at the cost of his own. I believe it was, and still is, owned by your father, Lord Finch. Dead silence, not a rustle of silk, not a clink of a glass. The entire room seemed to hold its breath. Annalise had not just defended herself, She had taken the foundation of Honoria's life, her wealth, her status, her father's name, and exposed it as being built on a callousness her own family had paid to mitigate. She had not raised her voice, she had not shed a tear. She had simply spoken the truth, and it had landed with the force of a cannonball. Lady Honoria's face, which had been a mask of triumphant pity, was now a ruin. The colour drained from her cheeks, leaving her looking stark and ugly beneath her diamonds. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She had been silenced, utterly and completely, not by a duke's rage, but by a quiet woman's words. Alistair looked down at Annalise, and the expression on his face was one she had never seen before. The granite was gone, the shadows had vanished. In their place was a raw, blinding awe. He tucked her hand into the crook of his arm. "My Duchess," he said, and the two words were a vow, a coronation, a love song. They turned and walked away from the wreckage of Honoria's social standing, moving through the parted crowd as if they were the only two people in the world. No one dared to meet their eyes. In the blessed privacy of their carriage, the silence was no longer awkward or distant. It was a shared space, filled with everything that had just been said, and everything that had not. He reached across the carriage and took her hand, his thumb tracing a pattern over her knuckles. He wanted a quiet wife, she whispered into the darkness, the words a ghost of his proposal. He was a fool, Alistair murmured, his voice thick. He did not know what he was asking for. He leaned in, and his lips met hers. It was not a kiss of passion, but of profound, breathtaking reverence. It was the sealing of a new bargain, one made not of convenience, but of a deep and startling connection. It was the first day of their real marriage. 1 year later, the conservatory was Annalise's domain. Sunlight streamed through the clean glass, illuminating the vibrant green of 100 living plants. On her workbench, next to a half-finished carving of a soaring hawk, sat the first little wooden bird she had ever brought to Blackwood Manor. The door opened, and Alistair came in, treading carefully around a pot of blooming orchids. He no longer smelled only of paper and beeswax. There was a new scent that clung to him now, the faint, pleasant aroma of fresh wood shavings. He came to stand behind her, his hands resting on her shoulders. She leaned back against him, the familiar weight a comfort and a joy. The silence in the house was no longer empty, it was full. It was the peaceful, contented silence of two people who understood each other without the need for constant words. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, his voice a low rumble against her ear. She picked up the small, simple bird, its wings still captured in that moment of arrested flight. "I was thinking about how I used to believe my voice was a thing to be hidden," she said. "That to be quiet was to be safe." He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "And now?" Annalise looked around her sun-drenched sanctuary, at the man she loved, at the life they had built in the quiet spaces. "Now I know that silence is not the absence of a voice," she said softly. "It is just the moment before you choose to speak." His arms tightened around her. Her life was not loud, but it was, at last, her own. And it was more beautiful than anything she could have ever imagined.